and you're watching Roots TV Nigeria. Nigeria has just crossed a significant milestone by the conduct of its 2019 general elections. The next question that comes to mind is, what's next? You're on this Roots TV campaign where we're out to figure out what Nigeria really needs. Being that the elections are concluded, what is the next step going forward? What options do we have? Now, with me here to discuss this and many more is a legal practitioner. Now, this legal practitioner is one like not too many, because he specializes in developmental law, constitutional reforms, all of the likes. He's a significant analyst that we're having a conversation with, who would tell us where Nigeria needs to be headed. And I'm talking about none other than Eze Onyepere. It's a pleasure having you, sir.
My pleasure.
All right, sir. Now, looking at the conduct of Nigeria's general elections, tell us the impact, either positive or negative, that these elections have had on Nigeria's almost 20 years of democracy.
Well, very well. We've just concluded elections. The results are out, especially at the presidential level, although a few states still have inconclusive gubernatorial elections. And funny enough, that was simply crept into our lexicon quite recently, and everything started becoming inconclusive. Well, at the presidential level, things have not been going so smoothly in Nigeria. There's a lot of tension in the land. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of joblessness. And the economy is not going in the right direction. So the next question, or the question of what Nigerians expect, is what exactly is the definition of the next level? Because the next level was the promise made by the president. And we don't know what exactly that next level implies, whether it's next level of doing more of the same, or next level of tweaking policies and changing direction in a course correction attitude. But in essence, Nigerians are not happy with what has happened in the last 20 years. So the next steps should be, how do we have a departure from what has been going wrong in the past, and then begin to move in the positive direction? For instance, how do we have a departure from about 23% unemployment so that the unemployment level can come down to single digit? How do we have a departure from an inflation rate that is above single digit and rein it into even lower single digits? How do we have a departure from interest rates that are in the over 20% and bring it within single digit? So how do we have a departure from joblessness for our youths and then make sure every person is fully employed, or a reasonable number more are fully employed? How do we have a departure from stating value chains in the budget, yet we don't understand what value chains are, simply budgeting for the sake of budgeting, mismanaging resources, and then moving on, as if to say that is how life should be run? So the next steps for us is just a part of answers to these posers. And these posers must be answered in a way and a manner that affects the existentialism of the average Nigerian in terms of improving his living conditions. Not just the propaganda, not just theorizing, but making sure that people live a dignified and fulfilled life in larger freedom, where what they need, education, health, housing, access routes, communications, power, are met on a day-to-day basis. So
to you now, with Nigeria's general elections, we basically got a dent in our democracy.
Well, we did not get the kind of elections that we had expected, considering the little achievement that was done in 2015. The expectation was that we were going to build from there, but we didn't build from there. Rather, we had a retrogression. Of course, in 2015, you had the Court of Appeal give a judgment saying, you dare not bring soldiers near the polling stations or the booths. Let them be out of it. As usual, they're usually out unless there's a huge crisis that the police or civil defense can handle. You bring them in. But this time around, we have them taking over the elections, contrary to the decision of the Court of Appeal. We had talks everywhere. You have vote buying. So we have situations which show some little level of incompetence on the part of the election management body. And of course, an atmosphere that was soaked in fear, an atmosphere that was soaked in division, and an atmosphere that was not really truly democratic. So we've come back, and the challenge going forward is that we need men and women in the Senate, in the House of Reps, and the President himself who have to begin to think for the larger picture, the bigger picture for the interests of Nigerians, and no longer thinking partisan or from wherever divisions and skewed attitudes they've had in the past.
Now, with all that you said, meaning that with all the election petition cases, that's going to be a fallout that's expected, from these elections. Being that as Nigerians, we shouldn't get distracted with that. Yes, it's the right of, the parties to go to election and all of that. But what effect do you think this would have? What should we be concentrating on as a country?
Everybody should concentrate on his job definition and job schedule. That's the best way for a country to move forward. And those who have been elected particularly to serve us should now begin to think how best they can serve us. Unfortunately, the elections did not throw up any set of new faces. It's just a continuation of the same. And if we take the trajectory of what we have benefited in the last 20 years, or particularly the last 4 years, as a mark or evidence of what to expect in the next 4 years, I think there's a level of gloom pervading over the land. You can see that after the presidential elections, there wasn't much jubilation. Rather, the stock exchange has shed a lot of weight since then, showing that investors are not happy. Investment decisions have not yet been reversed. People are still adopting the wait-and-see attitude to see if there's any new thing that the existing government, which has been given a new mandate, will change. Because the question is, if you have been given a new mandate after running for 4 years, that means that the people are happy with what you are doing. So you are asked to carry go and do more of the same. Unfortunately, the people who made the decision to vote is just the generality of the people. They are not really the people who take investment decisions and economic decisions. And the economic policymakers, economic investors, development experts are not happy with what has happened unless there is a promise of a change in terms of changing the policy direction, changing the mindset, changing the manner of implementation so that we can start targeting great results.
And that brings me to my next question exactly. What constitutional reforms would you pinpoint should be looked into in this next term?
There are so many of them. For instance, the National Assembly amended the constitution to fix a time frame for the executive and legislature to conclude the budget. But unfortunately, the president did not take proper advice. He threw it out. I expect it to come back. We still expect a division between the role of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. What the current Minister of Justice has done is a bit scandalous. We need a real well-groomed lawyer and technocrat to occupy the position of Attorney General. Then somebody can play politics as the Minister of Justice, because the Attorney General should be one who understands the tenets of the legal profession and should be a very good professional, especially the ethical dimension. Apart from his competence, the ethical dimension should come out strongly. And of course, we've been talking about devolution of powers, whatever you call it. It's been there all along. APC promised it, they denied. Nobody knows what they're planning now. Those things should be in the Constitution. We are also saying beyond the Constitution, you can't simply be talking of reforming Nigeria's economy without thinking about the oil sector, which is still accounting for over 52% of our expected revenue. So we must reform the oil sector. The president should stop playing politics with the oil sector. We need the petroleum industry bills like the type that the National Assembly has passed, and he found a reason not to assent. He should simply sit down with the legislature. If he has an executive bill, this thing should be prioritized so that once we hit their sworn in 2-3 months, these bills are out. We need to reform the petroleum sector. We need to incentivize and intensify public-private partnership with special purpose vehicles. We can't continue borrowing ad infinitum forever, because we are currently spending 68 kobo out of every 100 kobo we earn to pay back the monies we borrowed before, the debts. And most of those debts we can't even see where they were invested in terms of being invested in the growth drivers to now generate resources for us to pay back.
Now let's go to the composition of the 9th National Assembly now. The National Assembly members elect got their certificate of return yesterday. Now the conversation about who the next Senate president will be,
that shouldn't be an important factor to occupy the media. We should be talking about competence. We should be talking about competent men and women, and not about the kind of human beings that have so far said they want to occupy are people that cannot inspire confidence.
Okay, now the Senate is just beginning debate, on the 2019 budget of continuity. Now, being on the assumptions on which this budget was premised, give us a prediction on the budget's implementation.
Now, the budget is built on very shaky foundations. because the revenue framework and underlying assumptions are shaky. They are not based on empirical evidence. For instance, in the last 2 years, 2017-2018, the revenue projections, when you compare them to actuals, we have failed to realize less than 50% of the projection. So we projected in 2017 about 5 point something some trillions, 5 to 6 trillion, but what we realized was not up to 30. And up to the third quarter of last year, if you prorate the projected revenue we should have gotten, it was 5 point something, about 5.2, 5.3, but all we realized was not up to 2.5, less than 50%. And it's the same thing we are repeating in 2018, 2019. So the revenues will not come in to fund the budget. And therefore that means we're even going to borrow more, because even the budget did not take cognizance of the demand of labor for wage increase. So as we speak now, there's a huge deficit which has to balloon further by the time they pass the minimum wage bill and the president assents to it.
The President Muhammadu Buhari is a bit optimistic with this APC-led night assembly that he can change the budgetary circle.
No, it is not about the budget. It is not about changing the budgetary circle. It's about what goes into the budget. He cannot change it unless you amend the constitution. And the one that was done, he has not offered any tangible reason for refusing to assent to it. Otherwise, all he can say is his reason is that the leadership of the outgoing National Assembly, he didn't like their faith, so he was running the say no campaign. Every bill they brought, he refused to sign, and gives one flimsy excuse or the other. Because I've been following these things.
Okay, now with this recent order that was given by the president to NNPC and PDC to take over OML 11, and from Shell. There are sentiments that have arisen being of the plight of the Ogoni people and all of that, but was that a developmental move?
No, because there must be a benchmark. There must be a law or policy under which you move. Is the law, the management of our sector shouldn't be at the whims and caprice of the president. Whether you think it's positive or for the public good, these are all sentimental. Why has he stayed 4 years without establishing the benchmark in the petroleum industry bill? Why has it not been passed into law, the governance, the fiscals, and the community relationship, so that you now streamline how you are going to react to oil wells, oil licenses that have expired? You set a benchmark. It doesn't have to be at your discretion. You are dealing with oil in the Niger Delta while you come from Katsina State. Yes, you are the president. That's oil belongs to somebody else. Strictly speaking, if we should follow our law, quick planted solo shady. Whoever owns the land owns the property in it. At the worst scenario, you invoke the Land Use Act, it belongs to the state government and the people there. So there must be a benchmark, a process and procedure which every Nigerian understands and which is publicly agreed. Not the president saying, no, you mean well, revoke an NPC, take back. What is an NPC going to do with it? The ones that are managing, how well are they managing it? To continue stealing the money under the cost, under the recovery principle, which is not appropriated by Parliament.
And that is one place to actually drop it right now. Thank you so much, very much. We have been listening to Eze Onyekwere. Now, from all of the assertion, from what you've heard, from what his thoughts are about the policies, the economy, Nigeria's re-election, and how the electoral process, had played out, there is a long way for this next level, as they call it, to go. You've been watching Roots TV campaign on what does Nigeria really need. Stay on Roots TV. I'm Aisha Jibrin.